Welcome back. Today I'm going to discuss Warhammer 40,000 Gladius, and I had mentioned that I could go through the DLC and see which ones I recommend, and some people are asking me to do that because if you buy all the DLC, it does get to be pretty expensive. What I would recommend though is if you're trying to save money, either go with the bundle on Steam because then you'll get cheaper percentages because it'll knock it off as a percentage, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have to buy all the DLC from Steam, because if you go to a secondary key site like Kingwin, you can sometimes find the base game and the DLC for a cheaper amount, and then once you convert that into your library, if there's ones that are not significantly discounted, buy the ones that are discounted, and then that gets added to the library, and then when you go down to buy the bundle, you'll already have the price subtracted of the ones you've already saved money on, and then you'll get the percentage off of the games that are not in there, included onto Kingwin or something if you can't find a better deal. So that's what my recommendation would be, because some of the DLC are quite expensive, especially when you take into consideration that the base game, was originally $40, and then that had multiple factions in it, and then they release another faction, and that's $15 at the starting rate. Now the price does decrease, and you can definitely buy this on sale and save quite a bit of money, but that's what my recommendation would be. Now, obviously that's the base game. For the DLC here, if you want the soundtrack, fine. Otherwise, that's not something I would have normally bought, but again, I was trying to get the percentage saved. The first DLC that you can that I can review here would be the Lord of Skulls. This one I would say is a big old pass. The reason being is you're paying $3 for this one unit to randomly show up on the map, and your quest is like, hey, Lord of Skulls just showed up somewhere on the planet, go kill it, and it doesn't even tell you where it is. So it may spawn like right outside your base, it could spawn on the enemy's part of the map, it just randomly shows up, and then I think you have an X amount of turns to kill it, and then if you kill it, you get a faction-wide buff that lasts for a while until it spawns again, and it has several powerful attacks. It's a super heavy unit, but you're paying $3 for literally a fairly inert ability here, so not something I would recommend. So definitely a hard pass on that DLC unless you are just looking for it. Likewise, if you want the wallpapers, go ahead and get the wallpapers here. Otherwise, just get a big old pass on that as well. The next DLC is the reinforcement pack here. And the big thing with this is it adds units for each faction, so it gives you the Tempestus Scions for the Astra Militarum. They're nothing special, they're just a little bit stronger infantry, but for the most part with the Astra Militarum you're going to be using vehicles, so that's definitely a pass. The Immortals are a decent unit, but again, by the late game you're never going to be using these things, so pass there as well. Now, I would say these are more viable if you're doing multiplayer matches, because especially against a human player, because then you're more likely to use some of these lower tier units while you're waiting for the research to take off. But again, for the most part, you're not going to be using these guys, so hard pass there. Same with the flash kits, they're decent ranged units, but you're going to be using higher tier units, and it's never going to become a backbone unit of your squad. So for that, that's a pass for me too. Now, this one's claim to fame here is the Space Marine Land Raider. To this day, this is one of the backbone units to the Space Marine army, and that's because you can use this as a effectively a tank and soak up a bunch of attacks, and it does good amounts of damage, and it allows you to transport around your Terminators and other units that may otherwise be have difficulty covering the map once you use your orbital deployment ability there. So if you're going to be playing as the Space Marines, then I would highly recommend that you get this DLC because of the Land Raider, because like I said, that is pretty much my Space Marine armies include Land Raiders, Devastator Centurions, and their aircraft, I forget what it's called, Storm Raven, I think, to be able to do a bunch of damage, and then a bunch of heroes. So keep that into consideration. And then early on, I use a bunch of land speeders. So this one, if you're going to be playing Space Marines and then I think this is a good one to get. And then the other benefit that this pack has is it does add a neutral unit, which are the neophyte hybrids, and these things are like the most annoying freaking guys to have on the map, because every other turn they get to put themselves into shrouded, which means that they get to suffer damage resistance from ranged attacks. But I always like having more variable neutral enemies here, so it just seems to get a little more varied in your gameplay. So you know, these two things I think are reasonable. Like I said, if you're not going to be playing a lot of Space Marines, I'd probably pass this DLC, but if you are going to be a Space Marine Andy, then by all means I think this is one that you would want to purchase here. And if you can see, you know, here's the Land Raider. It gets a bunch of different weapons on there. It gets las cannons, multi-meltas, just does really good damage. There's your Immortals. Those are your Flash Git. Nope, maybe they're Tempest. Nope, those are Flash Gits, I think. These are your Neophytes. Yeah, there's your Tempesta Scions. They're cool looking guys. No, those are the Flash Gits. What the hell are those guys then? Yeah, I'm not sure what those are supposed to be here. But those are your different units here that you'll get with that DLC. The next one is the Tyranids. Obviously, I'm always going to recommend that if you're going to buy this game, you want to get the other factions, and so this just gives you access to the Tyranids faction. So again, I'd strongly recommend that. Likewise, I'd strongly recommend the Chaos Space Marines to add another faction into here. The Fortification pack, you know, it gives you access to the Space Marine Aquila macro cannon. This is a fortress that you can throw down that's very similar to your Fortresses of Redemption, except it has a longer attack range, so it looks like this. It is definitely useful. The thing that can be really freaking obnoxious, you can deploy this anywhere on the map. So when you're attacking your opponents, you can literally just deploy one of these either on the corner, on the edge of your battlefield, or right outside their base, and then you can do a bunch of damage. So it definitely is a very good weapon to be able to summon in there, and you can definitely use it. So it has some gameplay for sure. The Astra Militarums gets access to the shield generators, and that's actually I think that's the Necron version, is it not? Yeah, here we go. Space Marine. So that's the shield generator. On multiplayer, I do see that gets some play. Effectively, you just deposit it down, and then it gives your units some damage reduction, so it has some play. Against the AI, I hardly ever use it because the battlefield just shifts so much. So you're effectively got to sit there, set it up, use it, and then you got to destroy it when you're moving on. Otherwise, you have to pay an upkeep to get this thing to stay there, unless you want to just keep it. The equivalent to that is the Noctilith Crown, which is the Chaos Space Marine version. And again, that gives you some damage reduction. Then it also has a little bit of an attack range too that it can do, and then it affects enemy psychers. But for the most part, I rarely ever use it. Kind of going along with the defensive spots here, the Necrons get access to the Gauss pylons. They are fairly decent here. You can see it over here. It's got good range that it's able to attack, but nothing amazing. The Orcs get access to the big mech. He's kind of a fun unit in that he can have some repair abilities, if I remember correctly, and then he also gives you a damage reduction. So has some use, but nothing amazing. He is not a hero. He's just considered a more elite unit. And then the Tyranids have access to Biovores, which I never use. The AI definitely likes to use the Biovores when you're playing against them. There's the big mech. And here's your Biovores, but for me, it's nothing special. So again, if you're going to be playing as if you want to have more access to some extra buildings that you can use around the battle site, like the Aquila macro cannon, shield generator, Noctilith Crown, or the Gauss pylon, then it can be reasonable. But for the most part, I don't tend to use these very often. So if I was doing it again, I'd save the $5 and not purchase this one unless you're wanting to harass your opponent. Certainly, if you're going to be playing online, these guys can be a complete pain in the ass, and then the generators become a little bit better. But for the most part, not a huge fan of that. Tau, again, it gives you access to a whole nother faction, so I recommend that you always get, if you're going to buy a game like this, you always want to have the other factions. So for the assault pack here, This gives you access to the Astra Militarum Chimeras. Early on, those can actually be pretty decent, and when I was doing some multiplayer matches, I would actually frequently use Chimeras and then just load in some infantry, and then you get additional attacks. So it does have some use, but then when I'm playing like single player, I never use it. So you just have to decide what kind of what you're going to end up doing with this game. Where's the Chimera? There it is. So you can see it's kind of coming off. It can go through different kinds of terrain, and then just let you transport troops around. And then when they're inside there, those side guns here are activated, so you get bonus attacks when you put infantry actually into the transport vehicle. So in that way, it's kind of interesting. But what most people tend to do is just go flak cannon heavy when they're rushing, and then they just bypass the Chimera. So you have alternatives to this. So plus or minus. For me, it's not great. Like I said, early on, I was using it when I was doing some multiplayer matches, but now it's nothing. Kind of the big thing with this one is getting access to this unit here for the Tyranids. This is one of their most powerful units in their roster. Where'd he go? There he is, right here. This is like your super heavy that these guys have. It has a ton of health, does a ton of damage, does a lot of charge attacks. So if you're going to be playing as the Tyranids, you probably want to get the Assault Pack just for this unit here. Because like I said, that's one of the most powerful units in the game, especially for the Tyranids. The Tau, you get access to the Tide Wall gun rig. Nothing special. Effectively, you can just move it around the map, and then it gives you some additional attacks and some powerful overwatch, if I remember correctly, but nothing special. The Orcs get the War Biker. Again, nothing very special there. It can just move around the map a little bit and get some attacks to kind of help clear out the forest and neutrals, but you have so many other options that it just doesn't make sense to focus on this. The Necrons get access to the Flayed Ones. You know, it's a close combat unit that gets to avoid the overwatch, but I never see it used. The other unit that's very, very powerful, and why I would recommend getting this DLC in addition to the Tyranid unit, would be the Chaos Space Marine Land Raider. And so just like how the Land Raider is a mainstay backbone to my Space Marine army, the Chaos Land Raider is one of the backbones to my Chaos army, because I kind of alternate between them and the Defilers. And then later in the game with other DLC, you get access to some other high tier units too. But for the most part, you want to use these guys because they have good range damage, can help you take out vehicles. They can take a hit. You can heal them with your multiple healing units and just kind of move around the map and help you move units that may not be able to survive, or if you need to get guys quickly out of combat to help them heal, especially if you're using an infantry build with all the boons of chaos that you want to keep them alive, then using the Land Raider is huge. So for that reason, I definitely recommend getting this DLC, especially if you're going to be playing with the Forces of Chaos. And then the Razorback is just a low tier infantry transport, but again, if you're going to have the Land Raiders, there's really no reason that you'd be using the Razorback here, because it's just going to be totally irrelevant later in the game. But as you can see, you got the Chaos, you've got your Chimera, you've got your Flayed Ones here, you've got the Razorback, the Tyranid unit. That's what your gun rig looks like with the Tau. So you'll see the AI use it a lot, but I have never found it to be that impressive. And then you have your War Bikers here, but you can't even barely see what they're doing because the other units are in the way here. So nothing special there. But for the Assault Pack, you do get some really good units. So I would recommend that if you have those other factions. Again, Eldari, recommend that you get it just for another faction here. The Specialist Pack. This gives you access to Ratlings. If you're starting out as the Astra Militarum and you don't have much for ore and you're in a heavy food area, then I do like to use the Ratlings, because these guys allow you to run around the map, snipe enemy units, and clear out neutrals really easily, and then they don't trigger Overwatch, so it allows you to really kill neutrals very well and get a rapid expansion, so you'll be able to get a better starting, because you really want to go with your vehicles if you're going to use the Astra Militarum. So the Ratlings are a pretty good choice, but however, if you start out with around a lot of ore, then it's going to be irrelevant. But this just is a way to make your build a little more viable early on while you're waiting, if you're starting into a high food economy. The Dark Disciples are decent. I rarely use them because I tend to go with a real mechanized force. However, if you're going to do an infantry build with your Chaos Space Marines, then I think throwing in a couple of Dark Disciples could be reasonable. Effectively, what they do is, as long as you have guys around them, like other units, then having the Dark Disciples there allows you to buff up the units that are around the Dark Disciples, and it gives you some damage reduction. The Warlords are okay. I never use them. The AI uses them. They can do okay damage, but nothing special. The Necron units get the race. They're nothing special. The Orcs get access to the Kill Bursta, which is a pretty decent weapon, or a pretty decent unit. However, it becomes irrelevant later on once you start getting Gorkanauts and Squigus and, you know, a lot more powerful units. But these are okay, especially if you're stuck for whatever reason in the mid-tier game. If you're going to be playing Space Marines, then this is a must-have DLC because you get access to the Devastator Centurion. This is, in my opinion, the most powerful weapon that unit that the Space Marines can get. It does amazing damage at range. They can't take as much of a hit as you would expect since they're Centurions. You know, there's a super heavy armored unit, but the big thing with them is not only do they do amazing damage at range, you can use your apothecaries to heal them, to keep them alive longer, but they also they're one of the few units in the game that get access to a special ability that allows them to ignore damage reduction. So therefore, it allows these guys to really easily just totally destroy the Dark Eldar, which all their units get damage reductions across the board, or even more importantly, taking out aircraft that will be using that, was it not Jink ability or something like that? And then that reduces the damage they take by 30 to 50%, so you can just totally bypass this and then allow you to easily get the kills here. And so especially if you use the Land Raiders with them, the Land Raiders can take the shots and the Devastators can be behind them because they're range 3 and just blow everything out of the sky. For the Tau, they get access to the Krutox Rider. Nothing special there. It's just an early on unit that allows you to get some units that have close combat capabilities where they're a little bit lacking before, but you'll rapidly grow out of these guys because they're just an early on unit. And then the Tyranids get the Venom Thrope. So if you're going to be, again, playing with Space Marines, then this is a must-have DLC. If you're going to do Orcs, it's a reasonable, you know, it's like two maybes with the Orcs, and then the Ratlings. I could definitely just ignore the Dark Disciples. The rest of this is irrelevant. So it's up to you whether these guys are interesting for you. As you'll see as a common theme here, the Space Marines are definitely the faction that get the most love. I suspect that means because it's the most popular faction, so they're going to invest some time and money into them. But that is definitely the most important unit in my roster when playing as the Space Marines. And so you can see Venom Thropes here. You can see, what are they? Oh, Dark Disciples here is what it's showing me, and those are what they look like to give damage reductions to everybody around there. Those are your Warlocks. Those are your Devastator Marines shooting a bunch of rockets and las guns into everybody, doing a ton of damage. There's your Kill Bursta, which is for your Orcs. So definitely some interesting units there. The next one is the Adeptus Mechanicus. Again, that's another faction DLC, so recommend that you get that. Definitely a fun faction to play with. The next DLC is the Escalation pack. And so what this gives you access to is the Forge Fiends. If you're going to be playing on multiplayer, this is a very common unit to just rush with the Chaos Forces because they get tons of attacks and they can do pretty decent damage. Late game, they get removed or they get overshadowed by other units, but I've definitely played against Chaos players online that just do mass Forge Fiend, and they can be a real pain in the butt. Tyranids get access to the Hive Guards, which is just a little bit of a stronger tanky ranged infantry unit, but nothing special there. The Adeptus Mechanicus get access to Skitarii Rangers, which is effectively just a sniper unit that lets them move through cover, but nothing special. Space Marines get Scouts. These are pretty much the Space Marine variants of the Ratling snipers. So again, early on, unless you're stuck in a place where you just can't, for some reason, can't get land speeders out, you could go with the Scout Army, but for the most part, there's no reason to get these guys. The Astra Militarum get a Devil Dog, which is just a tank that can do some extra armor piercing attacks to mess up other heavily armored vehicles. But again, you're going to be more likely just doing like a Lehman Russ build with some basilisks. There's a lot of better options than this, so it's nothing special. The Necrons get the Ghost Arc, which just gives you the ability to do a little bit of healing, which can be nice, but for the most part, your other Necron units have alternative ways to do healing abilities, so it's not essential. I never use them personally, but they do fill a little bit of a niche role that can help you. The Craft World gets access to Hornets, which again are nothing very special. It's just a little skimmer unit that doesn't do much. Orcs get access to the Scrap Jets. Again, nothing super special. It's just another mechanical unit, but there's other ones that are way, way better. Probably the most important thing here is if you're going to be playing as the Tau, this gives you access to the Tiger Shark, and this is the most powerful aircraft in the game in terms of the amount of life that it has, its attacks, everything like that. So if you're going to be playing Tau and you like to use aircraft, then this DLC is the one for you, because by getting this super heavy fighter bomber, that's where you get your money's worth out of this DLC. Otherwise, like I said, unless you're going to be playing multiplayer, there's not a whole lot here. And so you can see those are your Skitarii. There's your Devil Dog, your Hive Guards. There's your Hornet. That's what it's showing me. I'm like, what am I looking at here? And then your Tiger Sharks, Forge Fiends to have their double rotary cannons there, so it's like an anti-infantry. There's your healing unit for your Necrons. Am I blind? I don't see the scout snipers anywhere, but they look like you would expect, I guess. So, like I said, if you're going to be playing a lot with the Tau and you like aircraft, get this. Otherwise, I think it's definitely a pass. Adeptus Sororitas, again, another faction DLC. So I always recommend faction DLCs because it gives you most bang for your buck by purchasing more of it. And then you get the Firepower DLC. So what this does is it gives you access to the Rogeldorn battle tank, which is definitely a really good tank. However, later in the game, you'll replace it with the Baneblade. But, you know, it is a pretty good tank. So for a short period of time, it is something that you could use. The Whirlwind is something I never use. I never use the Death Marks with the Necrons. It's just more infantry, and I'd rather have guys do more damage. The Death Dreads, you know, surprising, you would think I would really like these guys because I like those little, what are they called? The Grot cans or whatever, because I tend to use those really early when I'm playing the campaign because they just have good range and melee damage. So you would think the Death Dreads would be really good too, but I've just never really found that I've needed them. Needed them when I've been playing a match. Sorry about that, had something stuck in my throat. Now, the big thing with this DLC here is if you're going to be playing Chaos Space Marines, this Greater Brass Scorpion is probably the most busted unit in the entire game. It starts out with greater than 100 HP. It has 3 different attacks, and then by the time you get it to being level 10, it has almost 300 HP. I mean, it has well over 250. So it's one of the most tanky units in the game, and it does pretty decent damage. It struggles at killing aircraft, but anything on the ground, it's going to absolutely devastate, and you're going to be spending a whole bunch of time trying to kill it. It's a demon, so it's going to heal a little bit every turn. You have lots of healing capabilities with your units. And if you're playing against the AI, it's an absolute pain in the ass because they're going to be spamming these brass scorpions on you, and they're just so hard to kill. But if you're going to be doing Chaos Space Marines, then I definitely recommend getting this DLC for this unit all by itself, since it's just a total game changer. The Tau get access to another battle suit. You know, nothing special. It's an okay battle suit, but there's other ones that do the job better. Eldari get access to the Dark Reaper. Again, it doesn't really fill role that needs to happen. They have so many other units that can fill this role that for you as well. Another amazing unit that this DLC gives you access to is the Wait, Breacher? This might not be the one I actually thought it was. Is the Breacher the one I thought it was? Because there's one I think that's a melee unit, and then there's one that has the cannons. And I can't think if that's the Death Dread. Oh no, I'm going to have to refresh my memory. It doesn't show me the photo of the unit I want to see. So I'm going to have to check this out here. But if this is if the Breacher is the one that has the cannon, then this is like one of my core units. And if it's the melee variant, which I think it actually is now that I'm thinking about it more. Let's see here. Powerful anti-vehicle armament. Utterly deadly at close quarters. Yeah, so these are not the ones I thought they were. Okay, I think I'm confusing it with the Destroyer. So the Breacher is one that I actually never use, because this is the close quarters variant that allows you to do some early anti-armor and building killing. But once you get the Destroyer, the Breacher is completely irrelevant because it has all that armor piercing, except not in melee range. So yes, I remember this now. So sorry about that. So this one it's a good unit, but it gets overshadowed. The Adeptus Sororitas get this unit, just gives you some more buffs. I've never really found it to be an amazing unit, so for me it's kind of a pass. And then it does give you access to the Poxwalker, which is kind of a fun neutral enemy, which just runs around the map here, and they start to get kills, and then they can run away, and then they can heal back up again. So they're like these really tanky guys that don't do a ton of damage. And then it looks like if you get this, you also got some free units as well. So you get the Tyrannocyte that can transport units. And I do see the AI use that a whole lot, but not a whole lot. And then Haunt Building. Yeah, so I don't know about that. I see the Tyrannocyte used by the AI, but I've personally never used it. So kind of the summary here is if you need if you're struggling with the Astra Militarum with your Leman Russes, kind of capping out, but then struggling to get to the Bane Blades later on, late game, then the Rogaldorn will kind of get you through that hump. Like I said, the Death Dreads are okay, but you're going to have other units that are going to be more viable. If you're playing Chaos Space Marines, then it's a must-buy because of the Greater Brass Scorpion, and then the rest of this is all lackluster units here. And so there's your Brass Scorpion. Like I said, it's got 3 attacks. It's got its regular attack, which is actually range and melee. It then has its cannon, which it'll shoot, and then it has the Stomp ability because it's a monster in its unit, and that allows it to do a ton of damage. These are your Adeptus Sororitas units here. There's your other mech. This is your Dark Reapers, Rogaldorn, your Death Marks, your Whirlwind, your Death Dreads. So those are the photos that they have here. So like I said, a lot of these DLCs, it's going to depend on what units you are using here. Now I'm looking at that photo here, and it does actually look like the Breacher is one of the units. So I'm going to have to open the game and look into this just to see if this is a unit I'm thinking it is or not. Drukhari is another faction. So again, if I always recommend the faction packs. The Demolition pack gives you access to the Dragoon. That's nothing special. You get access to the field artillery with the Astra Militarum, and again, your basilisks are way better, so that's nothing special. I played with these Chaos Terminators, and these are actually pretty decent, and they actually do fill a role. The big thing with Chaos is, unlike your other Space Marines where you only have the 3 resources, Chaos Space Marines have all the resources. So if you're in an area where you're low on ore, because that's what your vehicles are going to be relying on, and you need more food-based units, then the Chaos Terminators can work out very well. Now, the Obliterators, I think is what they're called, they're way better because they both have a melee attack and a really good ranged attack, so they're going to do more damage than the Terminators do. But the issue with them is that they can't take a hit. So your Terminator and your Obliterators, because they're considered demons, they can't get the boons. They're not considered champions of chaos, which means you can't get all the boons that you're unlocking throughout your research path, because that's how you make really powerful infantry with the forces of chaos, because you can get, I think, like 6 or 7 different boons to chaos, whereas the Terminators are considered champions of chaos, so they can get all of those special abilities. And so all of a sudden, and then you throw on the blessings of chaos as well, and you can make these guys super, super tanky and do really good work. The other thing that's really good with them is they have combi weapons. And so every 2 or 3 turns, you can use this really powerful overcharged range attack that can do shit tons of damage. So the Chaos Terminators definitely are a unit that you could use to add a little variability if you're struggling to keep your units alive and you want to do more of a infantry-based build instead of just going with a pure mechanized. So they definitely fill a niche role here. You have other resources, so you certainly don't need to feel compelled to get the Terminators. I mean, I would say it's the backbone to my army like some of these other units are, but it's definitely something to take into consideration. The Drukhari get access to a Talos, which is just a close combat unit, nothing particularly impressive. The Eldari get the Wraith Lord. The Necrons get the Scorptech Destroyers, again, nothing special. Orcs get the Burna Boys, again, nothing crazy. Deptosaurus get the Arcoflagellants, again, there's nothing particularly awesome there. The Space Marines get the Assault Terminators. I thought these were going to be like just amazing units, but for the most part, I don't actually like them very much. They're weaker in terms of their damage output than your regular Terminators, because the regular Terminators also have their Storm Bolters, whereas these guys only have access to melee. Kind of the niche role these guys would have is they have the Storm Shields, which gives them a significant damage resistance. So perhaps if you didn't buy some of the other DLC and you're really struggling to have somebody be tanky enough to survive getting hit after hit, then the Assault Terminators could maybe fill that role. But if you're buying the other DLC and getting the Devastators and the Land Raiders, I mean, there's just this isn't a role you need to have filled with your units, unless you're for some reason unable to just get into a next tier to unlock some of the higher tier units. But so these guys are definitely kind of a letdown. The Breachers, they do good damage, but nothing too special there. And then the Tyranids get the Maliceptor, I think is how you say it, and again, it has some fun abilities, but definitely not something I utilize regularly. And so you can see there's your little walker guy, your artillery. That's what your Chaos Terminators look like. They're real Chaos Terminators. You can see the Talon or Talos, whatever it's called, the Wraith Guard, your Scorptech Destroyers, there's your Burna Boys. Arcoflagellants are kind of looking anemic on that photo here. And then there's your Assault Terminators with their Storm Shields and Thunderhammers. And then there's your Breacher Squad, and then your extra Tyranid unit. But so nothing particularly amazing. If you want to have a little more variability with your Chaos Forces, then the Terminators are a decent option, but everything else here is not particularly impressive, especially if you've purchased some of the other DLCs that are already out there. And then the last DLC, which I actually thought this was going to be a faction, so I purchased this thinking, oh my god, I'm going to be able to play the Primaris Marines and have another Space Marine faction. I thought that was going to be really interesting. All this effectively does is add a bunch of Primaris units to your Space Marine roster. So there's nothing unique about these guys. Effectively, what they do is they add a bunch of HP and they get a bunch of extra attacks that makes them overall a little bit better at killing infantry. But if you've already purchased the other DLC, unless you're going to be playing online, in which case some of these units are incredibly overpowered with the sheer amount of HP that they're going to have to get through, because effectively that's what these Primaris do, is they give significant HP buffs to your infantry units and then make it a very similar build to the baseline units. But for the most part, I would have never bought this had I noticed that this was just extra units for the Space Marines and not an independent faction. But I mean, the Aggressor is your close quarter infantry that has the Flamestorm gauntlets, nothing special. The Primaris Hellblasters, you know, the equivalent would be the Devastator. These guys are pretty decent, but for the most part, if you have the other DLC, they're going to rapidly no longer be utilized. The Primaris Inceptor is just going to be a ranged jump infantry. The Intercessor is the more powerful Space Marine variant for your basic Marines. So this one's like, if you're already, because they already have, you can have trouble killing regular Space Marines, not assault Marines, but regular Space Marines early on, and then you have all those grenades that they can use. Well, here you go. Imagine fighting those, except now they have almost twice the amount of health, and that could be a real nightmare to do early on. Especially against another player. So like I said, if you're going to be playing multiplayer, these guys can be very, very powerful. The Primaris ETV, it sucks. I don't like it. The Repulsor is another transport vehicle that has weapons that help it kill light tier infantry. The Redemptor Dreadnought has a bunch of weapons on it that, again, help it kill units that have a bunch of different models in the squad, but regular Dreadnoughts are better at taking out other heavily armored units, so it's not great. And then you have the Storm Speeder as well. So like I said, I was very unimpressed by these units when I was playing with them on my last campaign here, but you can see what each one of these units looks like here. So I hope that is helpful here for you to decide what DLC to purchase, because like you can see, it can be cost a pretty penny, especially if you're going to buy them all off of Steam. I would definitely, like I said, recommend purchasing it, for getting some of these keys cheaper on alternative websites, and then loading them into Steam, and then at the very end, purchasing the bundle pack here, because that's how you'll save the most money. Also waiting for them to be on sale, because you'll see significant cost reductions at certain times of the year where you can really save upwards of, like, you know, get them for 50-60% off. So that can be huge for you. So I hope this is what you were looking for on me going through each one of these DLC and kind of giving my 2 cents. I hope it's helpful, and I hope I can save you some money by watching this video. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.